So in this video, we're going to look at how to submit in zyBooks. So here is a basic setup for how to submit code for grading in zyBooks. Now this is not one of your assignments because I'm not going to do your assignment for you. This is a sample program where all I have to do is use the scanner class to read in a int from the user. It even gives me the code here how to do it, and then print out that int times 2. So what I would like to do is I would like to solve that problem, but I don't want to do that in zyBooks. zyBooks we're going to use for submitting our code, but I don't want to use it for developing code. The interface for zyBooks developing code is hosted online, and therefore it's not quite as powerful as this IDE we installed on our computer. So we're learning how to use this professional grade IDE, Eclipse, and so you always want to develop and test your code in Eclipse. So I will always give you template code in zyBooks. So in this example, here is kind of the skeleton of a class. One very important thing to note, whatever this class is called, you want your class in Eclipse to be called the exact same thing. So this class is called main. In your assignments, they're going to have all kinds of different names, but observe what that class is called. Make sure that you name the class you create in Eclipse the exact same thing, including capitalization. So I'm going to go create a class called main in Eclipse. I'm going to go through the steps of creating a new Java project just to expose you to that again. And I'm going to name it assignment 0, name it whatever you'd like. I'm going to click next, and I'm going to choose not to create this module info.java file. Remember, when you do select that, it's going to populate some different packages and can cause different errors in your code. So always, if you have the option to select next and unselect that, do that for now. I'm going to click finish, and then I'm going to go into my source folder, right-click on that, and create my new class. I could have also gone up to the File menu, but I'm going to do that here. And again, I want to make sure I name it main. Now, we saw that the main template that was in zyBooks had a main method in here, so if I wanted that included, I could select that. However, it's not going to matter to me because once I have this skeleton, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to zyBooks, and I'm going to copy everything. That way I know I didn't leave something out. So copy and paste this here. And again, because the names match up, everything works out fine. Then you can actually go about solving the problem in Eclipse. So I'm going to solve this problem really quickly. It said to get an int from the user, I'll call it user input, equals, use my scanner class, it's called scnr, so scnr.nextInt is the method that I will call here. So this grabs an int, and then I just wanted to print it out, system.out.println, user input. But the instructions that I actually saw in zyBooks said to print out that number times 2. We didn't read those together thoroughly, but that was actually the instruction. So I'm going to print that number out times 2, and then I want to thoroughly test it. So I'm going to run it, and I'm going to test it with all kinds of values to make sure that it actually works. Now, if this ever happens to you where you run something and you don't see the box coming up where you can type, then it's probably been X'd out at some point. So you can go up to Window, Show View, and the thing that you type in so that the user can interact with your program is called the console. So you can see the console here. Once it pops up, you can drag this around. I can have anything wherever I want it to be in here. Typically, I like to keep the console at the bottom like this, and I'll get rid of that. So this is the setup that I like, but note that you can always get this box back by coming up here. I see the little red square, so I know my program's running. It's just waiting for me to put an input. So if I put the number 4 in, before I push the enter key, I want to think through what I expect to happen. Well, it's going to grab that 4, and then it's going to print out 4 times 2, which should be 8. Push enter. You can see that happens. And I would test my code several times. I'm going to push 10. I would expect 20. Good. I'm going to do a negative number like -5. You always want to be very thorough with your test cases. I would expect -10. Good. And then I'm going to do something like 500. I would expect 1,000. Perfect. Okay, so I would thoroughly test my code. Obviously, your programs are going to be bigger every time you do them, but make sure that you think of all kinds of test cases. Once you have decided that, hey, this code is ready for submission, if I only had one time to submit it to Dr. Agar, this is it. It would work perfectly. I'm going to grab it, copy it, and put it into zyBooks. Now you can copy just the piece of code that you did in here, or you can copy the whole thing. The only thing I would be very careful with doing it the way I did it is to watch your curly braces. Again, Eclipse does nice things like warns you. If you leave a curly brace, it's going to have a red X, and it's going to kind of highlight like, hey, something's wrong here, right? zyBooks does not do that. If I accidentally left off a curly brace, there are no warning signs for me. So just be very careful with curly braces anytime you work in zyBooks. Notice down here that there are two different modes. There is develop mode and submit mode. The one thing I would really advise against using develop mode. Develop mode is exactly what we just did over here. We developed something. If for whatever reason your computer just crashes and you don't have access to a computer with an IDE for, a day or so, then you can certainly develop in zyBooks. This is made so that someone wouldn't have to go through using one of these more professional tools. However, we are going to do that. I'm going to fix this curly brace because it's bugging me. So I don't want to use develop mode. However, if you did, note that you have to put the input in here. So I would need to push 4 before I run my program. That's an opposite order from Eclipse where I run my program and then enter the number. So zyBooks tries to point that out, like you have to put the input values in the box first before you click run. If your program accepted multiple lines of input, you would need to have them listed all here before you push run. Again, it's because it's not as powerful of an IDE, so it needs everything up front. I am not going to use develop mode. The purpose of zyBooks and the good thing for us is that we're going to use it to automatically give us feedback on how we're doing and submit our code for grading. So I'm going to toggle over to submit mode. And I know it seems kind of scary. You get into submit mode, you can submit for grading, but you have unlimited submissions until your deadline. So as long as you've tested your code, you should have no fear pushing the submit for grading button. If I made a mistake, so I'm going to just print user input instead of user input times 2. Maybe I tested it, but I read the instructions wrong. I'm going to submit for grading. And you can see sometimes it takes a little bit depending on the internet connection, how big your program is, things like that. And there's typically a variety of test cases that show you different things. Sometimes it's feedback like, hey, check out this part of the program, make sure you read the instructions. And sometimes it's, hey, your output didn't match what was expected. It just depends on the nature of the assignment. But you can see here there were 3 different test cases, and I didn't get points for any. At this point, if this happens, don't panic. Look at what the input is, 3, and then check it over in your Eclipse. Go back to the drawing board. Trying and failing is the normal thing with programming. No one learns how to program by doing everything right the first time. You have to be okay, especially when problems get harder. Going back, taking a big breath, really inspecting what it is that you missed. Maybe it was just a simple instruction. I asked you to print this word and you printed a different word. Or I asked you to read in an int and you read in a double. Something like that. So typically they're little bitty errors that get us caught up, but programming is very detail-oriented in nature. So you're going to want to go back, fix whatever it is, and try again. Now, if I come back to zyBooks, I'm going to fix my code. Again, I would never recommend fixing it in this environment. I'm going to grab my code again, put it in. Let's imagine that it was broken the first time. Now it's fixed, right? And then I'm going to submit for grading again. This time it should work. Again, I had tested it thoroughly over here. And you should see that I passed all 3 of the test cases. As soon as you've passed all the test cases, as long as it's before the deadline, you can move on. You can even continue submitting and getting things wrong, and that's okay. I'm going to keep your highest score that you achieve prior to the deadline. So have no fear in playing around with code, throwing something else in, like what happens if I do this next? Totally okay. Again, your highest score prior to your deadline is kept. Once you see this little badge that you got all of the points, then you know that you're good to move on. So again, some huge tips. Make sure the class name matches exactly. Make sure you don't leave off importing things. If maybe you imported it over here and forgot to copy and paste that in over here, that could cause an issue. And definitely watch your curly braces. Do not code in the zyBooks environment. Simple things like leaving off a curly brace or maybe leaving out a semicolon do not flag you the way that Eclipse does. For a new programmer, this is a nightmare. So do not code in zyBooks. Make sure you're always coding, thoroughly testing your code in ELC before submitting. I do not want to see you guys submitting back to back. If there is a submission that doesn't go through, I expect you to go take some time to rework your program, think about what it is that you got wrong, perhaps seek help on Piazza if needed, and for there to actually be a good bit of time between your different submissions. Okay, that is it. Good luck working through your assignments, and definitely reach out on Piazza if you have any questions.